In the heart of Seoul, a Korean Mafia boss walked into a speed dating event wearing a cheap jacket and a false name. Every woman looked at the broke widower and passed him by. Every woman. Except Nia, the black single mother who smiled at him like he still mattered. What she didn't know was that the quiet man across from her controlled the city's darkest corners. By the end of that night, Kang Ji-hoon had already decided. Nia and her 5-year-old daughter, Evergreen, would never struggle again. And nothing in her quiet little life was about to stay the same. Chapter 1. Nia stood in the narrow kitchen of her one-room apartment in Mapogu, counting the same 3 bills for the 3rd time that morning. The rent notice sat on the counter like a silent threat. 1,850,000 Korean wons due in 6 days. Next to it was Evergreen's preschool invoice. Another 420,000 Korean wons she didn't have. And then there was the overdue electricity bill that had already been cut once last winter. She pressed her fingers against her temples and exhaled. 5 years old. That was how long she had been doing this alone. Evergreen was currently sitting on the thin living room mat, carefully coloring a picture of a purple dragon, her little legs swinging back and forth. Every so often she would look up and smile at her mother like the world was still soft and safe. Nia smiled back, even though her chest felt tight. She had moved to Seoul 3 years ago after the divorce, chasing a teaching assistant job that paid just enough to keep them afloat, until the school downsized. Now she worked part-time at a cafe near Hongdae during the day and cleaned offices at night. Sleep had become a luxury she rationed like money. Tonight, though, was different. Her coworker, Ji-hoon, had practically forced the speed dating ticket into her hand. "You need to get out, Uni. Just once. You're only 29. You still have a life." Nia had almost laughed. A life? She had a 5-year-old, unpaid bills, and a body that stayed tired even after rest. But Ji-hoon had already paid for the ticket, and Evergreen's babysitter, an ajumma from the next building, had agreed to watch her until 10. So here she was. The speed dating event was held in a private room above a quiet cafe in Itaewon, the kind of place that tried to look expensive without actually being expensive. Soft jazz played through hidden speakers. Round tables were spaced far enough apart for privacy. Each woman would move every 7 minutes. Nia smoothed the front of her simple black dress, the only nice one she owned, and took a seat at table 9. The first 3 men were polite but uninterested. One kept checking his phone. Another spoke only about his crypto portfolio. The 3rd barely made eye contact. Then the 4th man sat down. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and quietly handsome in a way that didn't demand attention. His clothes were plain, a dark gray sweater that looked like it had been washed too many times, dark jeans, scuffed sneakers. There was a faint tiredness around his eyes, the kind that came from long nights and longer regrets. He introduced himself as Min, just Min. When the host rang the small bell, most of the women at nearby tables barely glanced at him. One actually stood up early and moved to another seat. Another gave him a tight, pitying smile before looking away. Nia noticed. She had been on the receiving end of that look too many times. The quiet dismissal, the assumption that you had nothing left to offer. So when Min's eyes met hers, uncertain and braced for rejection, she did the one thing no one else had done. She smiled. Not the polite, distant smile she usually gave strangers. A real one. "Hi," she said softly. "I'm Nia." Something shifted in his expression. Surprise, first. Then something warmer, almost cautious, like a man who had forgotten what kindness felt like. "Min," he repeated, voice low and slightly rough. "Thank you for not leaving." Nia tilted her head. "Why would I leave?" He looked at her for a long second, as if the question itself was strange. Around them, the room continued its careful choreography of forced smiles and half-hearted conversation. But at table 9, the air felt different. Quieter, heavier. Nia didn't know that the man sitting across from her had a real name that made powerful men lower their voices. She didn't know that the cheap sweater was part of a carefully chosen disguise. She didn't know that every other woman in the room had already been measured and found lacking by a man who trusted almost no one. All she knew was that he looked tired, and that no one else had bothered to see him. And for the first time in a long time, Nia wasn't the only one being overlooked. The 7-minute timer began to tick. Chapter 2. The 7-minute timer felt longer than it should have. Most of the other tables had already settled into the usual rhythm. Forced laughter, careful questions about jobs and hobbies, eyes already drifting toward the next rotation. But at table 9, the air stayed quiet. Min rested his forearms on the table, hands loosely clasped. Up close, Nia could see the faint scar that cut through his left eyebrow and the way his shoulders carried a kind of controlled stillness, as if he was used to being the most dangerous person in any room and was currently choosing not to be. "You're not from Seoul," he said. It wasn't a question. Nia blinked. "Is it that obvious? Your accent. Soft. And the way you looked at the menu earlier. Like you were converting the prices in your head." She let out a small, surprised breath. Most men didn't notice things like that. Most men didn't notice her at all. "I moved here 3 years ago," she admitted. "After my divorce. It's just me and my daughter now." Something shifted behind his eyes. Not pity. Something sharper. More focused. "How old?" 5. "Her name is Evergreen." The corner of his mouth almost curved. "That's a strong name." "She needed one," Nia said quietly. "The world isn't always kind to little black girls. I wanted her to grow up knowing she was allowed to take up space." Min studied her for a long moment. The jazz in the background faded into something distant. Around them, chairs scraped and women laughed too brightly, but none of it seemed to reach their table. "And you?" he asked. "Do you take up space, Nia?" The question landed heavier than it should have. She looked down at her hands, at the small scar on her thumb from a kitchen accident last winter, at the chipped nail polish she hadn't had time to fix. "I try," she said. "Some days more than others." He nodded once, as if she had given him an answer he understood too well. The host's bell rang, soft but clear. 7 minutes were up. Women around the room began to stand, smoothing dresses and offering polite smiles as they prepared to move to the next table. Nia placed her hands on the edge of her chair, ready to do the same. Min's voice stopped her. "Stay." It wasn't loud. It wasn't demanding, but there was a quiet weight behind the single word that made her pause. She looked at him. "The rules say we have to rotate." "I know." His gaze didn't leave hers. "I'm asking you to break them." For a second, neither of them moved. The other women were already shifting to new seats. One of the organizers glanced in their direction, but Min didn't look away from Nia. There was something in his expression that felt older than the cheap sweater and scuffed sneakers. Something that belonged to a man used to being obeyed. Nia's heart beat once, hard. She should have stood up. She should have smiled politely and moved on like everyone else. That was the safe thing, the sensible thing. Instead, she stayed seated. A faint, almost invisible shift passed through Min's shoulders. The smallest release of tension, as if he had been prepared for rejection and was still adjusting to the fact that it hadn't come. "Thank you," he said, voice lower now. Around them, the next round began. New conversations sparked to life. But at table 9, time seemed to slow again. Nia folded her hands in her lap, suddenly aware of how loud her own pulse sounded in her ears. She didn't know that the man across from her had already made 3 quiet decisions in the last 7 minutes. She didn't know that by staying, she had just stepped into a world that did not easily let people leave. All she knew was that for the first time in a very long time, someone was looking at her like she was worth breaking the rules for. Chapter 3. The second 7 minutes felt different from the first. Around them, the room continued its careful dance of polite conversation and practiced smiles. But at table 9 the air had changed. Nia could feel it in the way Min watched her. Not with the restless hunger of a man looking for a quick connection, but with a quiet, focused attention that made her feel seen in a way she wasn't used to. "You don't have to keep calling yourself Min," she said softly. "Not if it's not your real name." His eyes flickered. For a moment, something unreadable passed through them. Surprise, then caution, then a faint, almost reluctant respect. "It is the name I am using tonight," he answered. "That will have to be enough." Nia didn't push. She had learned long ago that some people carried their truths like closed doors. You didn't kick them open. You waited to be invited. Instead, she asked, "Why speed dating? You don't seem like the type. Min was silent for a few seconds. His thumb traced the edge of the table once, a small, controlled movement. I wanted to see what people look like when they think you have nothing to offer them, he said finally. Money changes the way the world sees you. I needed to know what remained when it was gone. The honesty in his voice was quiet, but it landed heavily between them. Nia studied his face, the tired eyes, the faint scar through his eyebrow, the way he held himself like a man who had learned to survive by never fully relaxing. And, she asked, what did you find? His gaze met hers and held. Most people look through you, he said. A few look past you. Almost no one looks at you. He paused. You looked at me. The words were simple. They shouldn't have made her chest tighten the way they did. Nia glanced down at her hands. I've been invisible before. I know what it feels like when someone finally sees you. Min's voice dropped even lower. Your daughter's father? He made you feel that way? She hesitated, then gave a small nod. He decided one day that we were too heavy to carry. Said he needed a lighter life. I haven't heard from him in 3 years. Something cold and sharp moved behind Min's eyes. It was gone almost as quickly as it appeared, but Nia caught it. A flash of something far darker than the soft-spoken man sitting across from her should have been capable of. He was a fool, Min said quietly. There was no heat in the words, only certainty. A man who walks away from a woman like you and a child like Evergreen does not deserve the air he still breathes. The way he said her daughter's name, carefully, as if it already mattered, sent a strange warmth through Nia's chest. The host's bell rang again. Another rotation. This time, Min didn't ask her to stay. He simply looked at her, waiting. Nia's pulse was loud in her ears. She knew she should move. The night was already longer than she had planned. Evergreen would be waiting. The babysitter's time was limited. And yet, I should go soon, she said almost reluctantly. My daughter. I will walk you out, Min said. Not a question. Not quite a demand either. Just a quiet statement of what would happen next. Nia searched his face. There was no arrogance there. Only a steady, unshakable certainty. As if the decision had already been made and the world would simply adjust around it. She should have said no. Instead, she nodded once. As they stood, Min's hand hovered near the small of her back. Not touching, but close enough that she could feel the heat of him. Close enough to guide without forcing. Around them, a few women glanced over with mild curiosity. 1 or 2 looked at Min with the same dismissive eyes as before. He didn't spare them a single glance. His attention remained on Nia alone. As they moved toward the exit, Nia had the strange, fleeting thought that the man beside her did not walk like someone who had ever been overlooked in his life. He walked like a man who decided which rooms were allowed to hold him. And for reasons she could not yet explain, that thought both unsettled her and made her feel safer than she had in years. Chapter 4. The night air in Itaewon carried the mixed scent of grilled meat, car exhaust, and late summer rain that hadn't fallen yet. Neon signs reflected off damp pavement as Nia stepped out of the cafe with Min beside her. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Min stood close without crowding her, his presence solid and quiet. He had the kind of stillness that made the noisy street feel slightly farther away. A group of young men walking toward them automatically parted to give him space, even though he hadn't looked in their direction. Nia noticed. She didn't comment on it. You don't have to walk me further, she said. I can call a taxi from here. I know, Min replied. I want to. The simplicity of the answer left little room for argument. They began walking toward the main road. The heels of Nia's only nice shoes clicked softly against the sidewalk. She was suddenly aware of how long it had been since she had walked next to a man like this. Not rushing, not arguing, not carrying the weight of old disappointment. You're quiet, Min observed. I'm thinking about whether you should have stayed at that table. She glanced at him. You don't waste time, do you? No, his voice was calm. Time is one of the few things that cannot be bought back. They stopped at the corner. A taxi with its orange light on approached, but Min lifted one hand in a small, almost lazy motion, and the driver continued past without slowing. Another taxi came a few seconds later. This time Min didn't signal. He simply looked at Nia. "Do you want to go home right now?" he asked. The question was soft, but it carried weight. It wasn't only about the taxi. It was about whether she was ready for the night to end. Nia hesitated. In her mind she saw Evergreen's small face. The way her daughter always waited up even when she promised she wouldn't. She saw the unpaid bills on the counter. She saw the careful walls she had built around her life so that nothing could hurt them again. And still, something in her resisted ending this. "I have a daughter waiting," she said finally. "I can't be reckless." Min nodded once, as if he had expected that answer and respected it. "Then I will make sure you get home safely. Nothing more. Not tonight." The way he said "not tonight" sent a slow current down her spine. It was a promise and a warning at the same time. He stepped closer to the curb and this time raised his hand properly. A taxi pulled up almost immediately. Min opened the back door for her, waiting until she was seated before closing it with care. Then he walked around and spoke quietly to the driver through the front window, giving an address in Mapogu that Nia had not told him. She stiffened. "How do you know where I live?" Min met her eyes through the open window. There was no apology in his expression, only quiet certainty. "I asked the host for the registration list while you were in the restroom," he said. "I wanted to make sure the driver took you to the right place. It should have felt invasive, dangerous even." Instead, the most honest part of Nia recognized something else underneath the action. A man who did not leave things to chance. A man who decided what needed to be done and simply did it. "That's a little intense," she said. "Yes," Min agreed. "It is." He didn't offer to change. He simply held her gaze for another second, then stepped back. "Text me when you arrive home," he said. "So I know you are safe." Nia realized she hadn't given him her number. Before she could point it out, Min placed a small folded piece of paper on the edge of the taxi window. Her own number was already written on it, in clean, sharp handwriting. Beneath it was another number. "I took the liberty," he said simply. "You can delete it if you want, but I hope you won't." The taxi began to pull away. Nia turned in her seat and watched him through the rear window. Min stood on the sidewalk with his hands in his pockets, the cheap sweater and scuffed sneakers doing nothing to make him look ordinary. Even in disguise, he looked like a man the night itself was careful around. Nia closed her fingers around the small piece of paper. She told herself she would throw it away when she got home. She already knew she wouldn't. Chapter 5. The taxi ride back to Mapogu felt longer than usual. Nia sat with the small folded paper pressed between her fingers, the numbers written in sharp, clean handwriting. Outside the window, Seoul moved past in streaks of light, neon signs, late buses, couples walking close together under street lamps. She kept replaying the moment Min had said, "Not tonight," the quiet certainty in his voice, the way he had already known her address without asking. When the taxi finally stopped in front of her building, she paid the driver and climbed the narrow stairs to the third floor. The hallway light flickered the way it always did. She unlocked the door as quietly as possible. Evergreen was supposed to be asleep. Instead, the little girl was sitting up on the thin mattress they shared, clutching her favorite stuffed rabbit, eyes bright the moment she saw her mother. "Mommy," she whispered, like it was a secret. "You're home." Nia's heart softened instantly. She dropped her bag, kicked off her shoes, and crossed the room in 3 steps, pulling her daughter into her arms. Evergreen smelled like baby lotion and the strawberry candy the babysitter sometimes snuck her. "I told you to sleep, baby." "I tried," Evergreen said against her neck. "But I wanted to make sure you came back." Nia closed her eyes and held her tighter. 5 years old and already worried about people leaving. That was the part that hurt the most. She changed into an old t-shirt, washed her face, and lay down beside her daughter. Evergreen curled into her side like she had done since she was a baby. Within minutes, the little girl's breathing slowed into sleep. Only then did Nia unfold the piece of paper again. She stared at the number for a long time. It would be smarter to throw it away. Safer. She had a child to protect and a life that already felt 1 hard month away from falling apart. Men who looked at her the way Min had looked at her usually wanted something she couldn't afford to give. And yet, She typed the number into her phone and wrote a single sentence. "I'm home." The reply came in under a minute. "Good. Sleep well, Nia. Lock the door." No emojis. No extra words. Just that. She locked the door. Then she lay in the dark with her daughter's small hand resting over her heart, staring at the ceiling, wondering why a man she had known for less than an hour already felt like someone the night itself was careful around. A message from the creator. Sometimes a story on YouTube can only go so far. There's another Afro-Korean story, His Secret, that goes further than this platform will ever allow. The intensity, the heat, the raw emotion. YouTube simply won't let it stay up. But Chapter 1 is free to listen to right now. If you've been craving something deeper and more dangerous than what you can find here, go check the description or the channel dashboard, or just scan the QR code on the screen. Listen to the first chapter. See if it grabs you the same way it grabbed me. Now back to our story. Nia finally closed her eyes sometime after midnight. She did not know that across the city, in a black car parked along the Han River, the man who had called himself Min was already no longer wearing the cheap sweater. The disguise had been removed. The tired posture had disappeared. In its place sat Kang Ji-hoon, the man whose name was spoken carefully in certain rooms, the man who controlled more of Seoul's shadows than most people would ever know. He stared at the short message on his phone. "I'm home." A single nod to the driver was all it took. The car pulled into traffic without a sound. "Find out everything," Ji-hoon said quietly. "Her work, her bills, the man who left her and the child. I want names, numbers, and locations by morning." The driver met his eyes in the rearview mirror. "And the woman?" Ji-hoon's gaze stayed on the phone. "She is not to be touched," he said. "Not by anyone. From this night forward, Nia and the child are under my protection, whether they know it yet or not." Chapter 6. Morning light filtered weakly through the thin curtains of the small apartment. Nia woke before her alarm, the way she always did. Evergreen was still curled against her side, one small arm thrown across her mother's waist, the stuffed rabbit trapped between them. For a few quiet seconds, Nia simply watched her daughter sleep. These were the moments that made the exhaustion worth it. Then reality returned. She carefully slipped out of bed, washed up, and moved into the kitchen. The rent notice was still on the counter. So was the preschool invoice. She opened the fridge, already knowing what she would find. Half a carton of milk, 3 eggs, and leftover rice from 2 nights ago. Enough for Evergreen's breakfast. She would skip hers again. While the rice warmed, her phone vibrated once on the counter. A message from the number she had saved last night under a single letter. M. "Did you sleep?" Nia stared at the screen. She had expected him to wait at least a day. Maybe longer. Most men did. Most men played games with timing. She typed back, "A little." "You?" The reply came almost immediately. "Enough. Eat something this morning. Not just the child." Nia's fingers froze over the screen. She looked toward the bedroom door, then back at the phone. There was no way he could know she often skipped meals. Unless she didn't reply. Instead, she finished preparing Evergreen's breakfast, woke her daughter with soft kisses, and got them both ready for the day. The preschool was a 15-minute walk. Nia held Evergreen's hand the entire way, listening to her chatter about purple dragons and weather clouds had feelings. Every so often, Nia's mind drifted back to the message. "Eat something this morning. Not just the child." Felt too knowing. After dropping Evergreen off, Nia walked to the cafe near Hongdae where she worked the morning shift. The owner, an older woman named Mrs. Han, barely looked up when she entered. "You're late by 4 minutes," Mrs. Han said. The preschool line was long. Mrs. Han made a small sound of disapproval and pointed toward the espresso machine. Nia tied her apron and got to work. The morning rush kept her body busy, but her mind kept returning to the man from last night. The way he had looked at her. The way he had spoken. The way he had already known her address. She told herself it was nothing. A strange man at a strange event. One night. One conversation. But her phone felt heavy in her pocket. Across the city, on the top floor of a private building in Cheongdam-dong, Kang Ji-hoon sat behind a wide black desk. The cheap sweater from the night before was gone, replaced by a dark tailored shirt with the sleeves rolled once at the wrists. In front of him lay a thin folder that had been delivered at 6:14 a.m. He opened it without hurry. Nia Brooks, 29, American-born, moved to Seoul 3 years ago after a divorce. One child, Evergreen Brooks, age 5. Current address confirmed. Place of work, a small cafe in Hongdae. Monthly income, barely enough to cover rent and preschool. Outstanding debts listed in clean, precise numbers. The ex-husband's name sat near the bottom of the page, along with his last known location in the United States. Ji-hoon's eyes lingered on that name for a long moment. Then he closed the folder. "Bring me the ex-husband's full financial records," he said, "and the name of every person who has made her life harder since she arrived in this city." Quietly, his second-in-command, a man named Choi, gave a short nod. "And the woman herself?" Ji-hoon turned his chair slightly toward the floor-to-ceiling windows. Seoul stretched out beneath him, gray and alive. "She will see me again," he said. "Soon, but not yet. First, I want the ground beneath her feet to stop shaking. She has carried enough." Choi hesitated. "If she finds out who you are before you're ready, she will find out when I decide she is ready." Ji-hoon cut in, voice calm but final. "Until then, no one approaches her. No one frightens her. No one makes her feel watched. If she senses anything, it will only be that life has become slightly kinder." He picked up his phone and looked at the short conversation from that morning. "Did you sleep? A little. You? Enough. Eat something this morning. Not just the child." A faint, almost invisible smile touched his mouth. She had not replied to the last message. That was fine. He could wait. Kang Ji-hoon was a patient man when it came to things he had already decided to keep. Chapter 7. By mid-afternoon, the cafe had slowed enough for Nia to catch her breath. She wiped down the counter for the third time, more for something to do with her hands than because it needed it. Mrs. Han had already left for the bank, leaving Nia alone with the soft hum of the refrigerator and the occasional customer who ordered iced Americano without looking up from their phone. Her own phone sat in her apron pocket like a secret. She had not replied to Min's last message. "Eat something this morning. Not just the child." The words kept circling in her mind. Felt too close. Too seeing. Part of her wanted to ask how he knew. Another part of her was afraid of the answer. At 2:47 p.m., the small bell above the cafe door chimed. Nia looked up automatically, already reaching for a menu, and then froze. It wasn't Min. It was a delivery man in a plain gray uniform, carrying a large paper bag from a well-known restaurant in Gangnam. The kind of place Nia had only ever seen in passing. The kind of place that didn't deliver to Mapogu for free. "Nia Brooks?" the man asked, checking a small note. She hesitated. "Yes. Delivery for you." He placed the bag on the counter, gave a short nod, and left before she could ask questions. Nia stared at the bag. Inside were carefully packed containers, warm rice, grilled mackerel, soft tofu stew, side dishes that still steamed when she lifted the lids, and a smaller container of mild, child-friendly food that looked like it had been chosen with a 5-year-old in mind. No receipt. No name. No note. Her hands trembled slightly as she closed the bag again. She told herself it could be a mistake, a wrong address, coincidence. But deep down, she already knew it wasn't. That evening, after picking Evergreen up from preschool, Nia sat on the floor of their apartment while her daughter ate the milder portion of the food with happy little sounds. Nia herself only managed a few bites. The rest she carefully saved. Her phone lit up. Did the food arrive safely? Nia's breath caught. She stared at the message for a long time before typing. "How did you know where I work?" The reply was almost immediate. "I pay attention." A second message followed. "You work too hard and eat too little. That ends now." Nia sat back against the wall, heart beating too fast. Evergreen looked up from her bowl, cheeks full, and gave her mother a curious smile. "Mommy, who keeps texting you?" Nia locked the phone and set it face down. "Just someone I met. Is he nice?" The question was so simple, so pure. Nia didn't know how to answer it. "I think so," she said quietly. I'm not sure yet. In Cheongdam-dong, Ji-hoon stood by the window of his office, phone in hand, watching the city lights begin to bloom across Seoul. Choi stood a few steps behind him, waiting. She accepted the food, Choi reported. Didn't throw it away. Shared it with the child. Ji-hoon gave a small nod. Good. Tomorrow, the preschool invoice disappears. Make it look like a scholarship adjustment. Nothing traceable. And the rent? Not yet. Too direct. She will notice if the ground moves too quickly beneath her. We go slowly. Choi hesitated. Boss. She's going to start asking questions soon. Women like her don't just accept kindness without wondering where it comes from. Ji-hoon's reflection in the glass was calm, almost cold. Let her wonder, he said. Wonder keeps her thinking about me. Fear would make her run. I don't want her afraid. Not of me. He turned from the window, eyes dark and steady. I want her to get used to the feeling that someone is finally standing between her and the world. By the time she learns my real name, it should already feel natural. Choi lowered his head. Understood. Alone again, Ji-hoon looked down at his phone. The last message from Nia still sat unanswered on his screen. How did you know where I work? He typed slowly. Because you matter now. Rest tonight, Nia. Tomorrow will be a little lighter. He sent it. Then he set the phone down and returned to the window, already planning the next quiet piece of her life he would repair without her permission, and without her knowing the cost of the protection she had just stepped under. Chapter 8. The next morning arrived with a thin gray sky over Mapogu. Nia woke to the sound of Evergreen humming softly to her stuffed rabbit. For once, the little girl hadn't climbed on top of her in the middle of the night. Nia lay still for a moment, staring at the ceiling, replaying the last message she had received. Because you matter now. Rest tonight, Nia. Tomorrow will be a little lighter. The words had stayed with her longer than they should have. She got up, prepared a simple breakfast, and helped Evergreen into her preschool clothes. The unpaid invoice still sat in the side pocket of her bag, folded and refolded so many times the edges had gone soft. 420,000 Korean wons. She had been counting days until the late fee would be added. At the preschool gate, the usual ajumma who handled payments stepped out before Nia could reach for her wallet. Brooks Evergreen's mother? The woman asked, checking a clipboard. Yes. You don't need to pay today. The balance has already been cleared. Nia stared at her. I'm sorry, what? The full amount, including next month. It shows as adjusted under a private scholarship support. You're all set. The woman gave a polite smile, already turning to the next parent. Have a good day. Nia stood frozen at the gate long after Evergreen had been led inside. Scholarship support. Private. No application. No interview. No explanation. Her hands were cold when she finally pulled out her phone. She typed slowly. Did you pay my daughter's preschool fee? The reply came within 30 seconds. I made sure it was no longer your problem. Nia's throat tightened. She stepped away from the gate, heart beating too fast, and typed again. You can't just do things like that. I don't even know you. This time the answer took longer. You know enough. You know I see you. You know I don't like watching you carry everything alone. The rest can wait. Nia leaned against the low wall outside the preschool, phone clutched in both hands. Around her, other parents chatted and hurried off to work. Normal lives. Normal mornings. None of them looked like they had just been quietly claimed by a stranger who moved through the world as if money and rules bent for him. She wrote one more message. Who are you really? The typing bubble appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Then his reply landed, calm and final. Someone who has already decided you and Evergreen are mine to protect. Meet me tonight, Nia. Same cafe in Itaewon. 7 o'clock. Come alone. Nia's breath left her in a slow, unsteady exhale. She should say no. She should demand answers first. She should protect the careful, fragile piece she had built for her daughter. Instead, she stared at the message until the screen dimmed, then locked the phone and slipped it back into her bag. All day at the cafe, her hands worked on automatic while her mind stayed fixed on one question. What kind of man paid a child's school fees without asking? and then told a woman she was already his to protect. And why did part of her, the tired, lonely, quietly starving part, want to find out? Chapter 9. Nia stood in front of the small mirror in her apartment at 6:20 p.m., staring at her reflection like it belonged to someone braver than she felt. She had changed clothes 3 times. The black dress from the speed dating night felt too deliberate. The jeans and blouse felt like she was trying to pretend this was casual. In the end, she chose a simple dark green dress she usually reserved for parent-teacher meetings. Clean, modest, nothing that begged for attention. Her hair was pulled back loosely. She wore no perfume, no lipstick. Evergreen sat on the mattress, watching her with wide, serious eyes. The stuffed rabbit clutched under one arm. "Mommy looks pretty," the little girl said softly. Nia's chest tightened. She knelt down and cupped her daughter's face with both hands. "Mommy's going to meet someone for a little while. Auntie June will stay with you until I come back. Okay?" Evergreen's fingers curled tighter around the rabbit. "Will you come back?" The question landed like a quiet blade. Nia pulled her close, pressing a kiss into her hair. "Always, baby. I will always come back to you." By the time she stepped out of the building, the sky over Seoul had deepened into that heavy blue that comes just before full night. She took the bus instead of a taxi, needing the extra minutes to steady her breathing. The entire ride, one sentence kept repeating in her mind. "Someone who has already decided you and Evergreen are mine to protect." The cafe in Itaewon looked different at night. Warmer, dimmer, softer around the edges. The upstairs private room was closed, but the main floor still held a few quiet tables near the windows. Nia paused just inside the entrance, her pulse loud in her ears. He was already there. Min sat at a corner table with a clear view of the door. The cheap sweater from the first night was gone. In its place was a black button-down shirt with the sleeves rolled once at the wrists. The change was subtle, but it altered everything. He no longer looked like a man trying to disappear. He looked like a man who had simply stopped pretending. When his eyes found hers, something in his expression eased. Not quite a smile, but close enough to make her stomach dip. Nia walked over and sat down without waiting to be invited. Her hands were cold in her lap. "You came," he said. "I almost didn't." "I know." A server approached, but Min gave the smallest shake of his head. The young man retreated without a word. The ease of that quiet command made Nia's spine tighten. She didn't waste time. "You paid my daughter's preschool fees. You sent food to my workplace. You knew my address before I ever gave it to you. I need you to explain what this is. Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like a stranger is trying to buy his way into my life." Min studied her for a long moment. The noise of the cafe seemed to fall away. "I'm not trying to buy you," he said quietly. "I'm removing the things that keep hurting you so that when you look at me, you don't have to look through exhaustion first." "That's not an answer. It's the only one that matters right now." Nia leaned forward, voice low but sharp. "Who are you?" His gaze didn't flicker. "Tonight I am still Min. The rest of my name comes with a cost. I'm not ready to ask you to pay it yet. And I'm just supposed to accept that?" "No," he said. "You're supposed to decide whether you feel safer when I'm near you or when I'm not. Everything else can wait." The honesty in his voice was more dangerous than any lie. Nia sat back, heart beating hard against her ribs. She wanted to be angry. She wanted to stand up and leave. Instead, she heard herself ask a different question, the one that had been living under her skin since the first night. "Why me?" Min's eyes moved over her face slowly, as if he was memorizing every detail. "Because you looked at me when no one else did," he said. "Because you have a child you protect with your whole body. Because the world has been taking from you for years and you still haven't become cruel. Men like me don't find women like you often. When we do, we don't let them struggle alone." Silence stretched between them, thick and charged. Outside the window, Itaewon continued its restless night. Inside, Nia felt the careful ground she had built under her life begin to shift. "I can't afford to be reckless," she whispered. "I have a daughter." "I know." Min's voice dropped even lower. "That's why I'm being careful with you. But make no mistake, Nia, I am not a careful man by nature. I'm choosing to be one for you. For now." The last two words hung in the air like a quiet warning, and a promise. Nia looked down at her hands, then back up at him. The smart choice was still to walk away. She knew that, and yet she remained in the chair, caught in the steady, unyielding gravity of a man who had already begun rearranging her world without permission, and somehow made it feel like protection instead of control. Outro. If this story found you at the right time, if you've ever felt overlooked, tired, or like you had to carry everything alone, I want you to hear this clearly. You are not invisible. You are not too much. And you are not too late. The right person will not be scared of your responsibilities. They will protect them. Now tell me in the comments. Team Min, trust the mystery, or Team Nia, demand the truth first? I'll be reading every single one. If you want more stories like this every week, make sure you're subscribed and have the notification bell turned on. New uploads drop regularly. Don't miss the next one. And if you're ready for something even more intense, something YouTube will never allow, go listen to Chapter 1 of His Secret for free. Link is in the description on the channel dashboard, or just scan the QR code on the screen. I'll see you in the next story. Take care of yourself.